Hello, welcome to Soulprint Intuitive Tarot for March 27th. So, there's a lot going on. It's been a heck of a week. Saw something really interesting on Morning Joe. So, and I can't remember the name of the organization, but, one of those political, type organizations that, put out election ads and that kind of thing. So there's one that's running. I saw this actually on Morning Joe. If you can access MSNBC on YouTube's even, and get the clip from Morning Joe, it was very well done, is what I'm trying to say. So there's this new commercial that has come out, and it really takes some of Trump's best moments. Everything's going to be fine. It's going to magically disappear with the daffodils. It's 15 cases, and that's going down to 0 statement. And of course, the famous, of course, I don't take any responsibility. And they've strung it together in a commercial. And sort of superimposed on that is this graph showing the sharp and very fast increase in coronavirus cases. Well, apparently, this advertisement is being shown in swing states. And apparently, Trump's campaign, I guess for re-election for 2020, has sent out cease and desist letters to where this thing is being shown, and they're saying you just can't show this. It's not wrong. It's a fallacy. It's whatever. Oh yeah, he also said it's a hoax. So he's getting really testy about the fact that people have taken all of his little flights of fantasy and dumb statements and have strung them together in a way that really brings some clarity to what goes on in his head and the way he says things and presents things. If you get a chance, see if you can find it. It's like a 30-second commercial, but wow, it packs a great deal of punch. So I thought that was really interesting because, of course, his priority is what's going to happen in the election and his campaign, because heaven knows the fact that, 80,000 people are affected with this virus in the United States is not important enough, I guess. So, by the way, for those of you who corrected me, I made a statement in yesterday's video about the number of people, the population of the United States. Okay, so I admit I missed 300,000 people. I kind of got the fact that the United States has like 330,000 people approximately. Canada has about 34 to 38, million. See, I did it again. 330 million people in the States. Canada has about 34, 35, 38 million. So I just, narrowed down your population a little bit. Okay. So this is interesting too. There was a poll that came out the other day, and the question basically was, how worried are you about this coronavirus? And the results in some ways were actually really heartbreaking to see. So 87% of Democrats said that they were, concerned, or I guess really concerned, or right? 51% of Republicans. That's it. 51% are concerned about the coronavirus, which means 1 in every 2 people in those red states in particular really don't think that there's a problem. They really don't understand what the fuss is about, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's concerning, right? I mean, it really is. I mean, you're talking about fellow human beings, fellow Americans, and in some cases, probably neighbors, family members, whatever, who are just sort of blindly putting themselves in jeopardy and at risk. So that's sad. Like, it really is sad. Okay. Yeah, and the other thing that was really appalling to hear is Mississippi, the governor there is not doing anything, and the mayors of a city and council got together and they said, we're, 2-week isolation, that kind of thing, we're shutting stuff down. And the governor of Mississippi overrode it with a government order, and he said, you most certainly are not shutting anything down in this state. So that's going to be interesting to see, because that, of course, is going to end up being a place where there is a significant infection, because in this very small window, they're choosing to do nothing about it, And that just takes a special kind of stupid to look at New York becoming like the new epicenter and saying, yeah, well, it's not nothing to worry about. That's just silly. I mean, I don't know. What does this guy think? Does this guy think that it only hits Democrats? Like, I don't know. So it's been a heck of a week. So what I want to do is I want to just take a quick look at kind of the week that was and what's coming up around the corner. Yeah. So let's just see what we see. One more. Look, there we go. All right, come on down. I have a question. So here we go. Government, current, immediate future. Government, current, immediate future. Government, current, immediate future. Okay. So your stock market has been doing a little bit better for the last 3 days or so. I understand that officially pulls it out of that bear market or bull market. I think bear. So that's good, right? So that is actually helpful, because that's going to calm Trump down at least a little bit, because he feels like his economy is not completely imploding. And so because that those aren't bad, he's going to hang on to that, and he's going to hopefully come out of the fantasy life he lives in, where everybody's going to be crowding churches at Easter. This may be part of why he is able to sort of almost like not only back off because he has to back off because what he's saying is flat out dangerous and not very smart, but more importantly, the fact that the economy just is a wee bit stronger than it was, like a few days ago, is going to be enough to satisfy him in the short term. So, just over the next little bit, you're going to see him praising himself to high heaven because the economy is back on track, and possibly settling down a little bit because he perceives that the economy is back on track. And because, in some ways he really has a very limited understanding of the economy, maybe that will keep him in a better place for a few days. It's going to get worse. You know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's going to get worse. You have such a large population, and you have many areas that are really, really congested. I mean, really, if you think about it, all of Canada, let's say we have 38 million people. I can't even imagine how many cities, how many different cities in your country have more than 38 million people living in sort of the city or the city center. So the congestion, it amplifies it. It makes this whole thing move faster and faster and faster. And as things move fast, you're going to see a lot of defensive posturing, and you're going to, again, see that sort of, kind of a little bit of a denial from the truth, right? Trying to escape some of the hard facts so that possibly you can paint a slightly rosier picture. So again, be very vigilant about taking what you hear to some degree with a grain of salt, unless it literally, you can find it being backed up by scientists, by doctors, by the World Health Organization, frankly, by information coming from other countries, because that's going to be a lot of what goes on. Things within the GOP are very emotional. Okay, there's a lot of emotions running really, really high, kind of everywhere, not only the GOP, even with the Democrats, because they are, trying to literally harness in their absolute frustration with having to deal with a group of people who, even in the middle of a global pandemic, are still worried about the almighty dollar before, I don't know, the sanctity of life. So there is a lot going on, again, behind the scenes. I keep saying this, and I don't really get a whole lot of clarity about what's going on behind the scenes, just that there's a lot of friction, there's a lot of infighting, there's a lot of opinions, and in some ways, because there are so many people who are so ill-equipped for their jobs. In many cases, it's sort of the loudest person or the last one talking that harnesses Trump's attention. So okay, so again, this has been a really difficult week. The numbers have started to really escalate, and in some ways, all of the cracks in the system, all of the fault lines, the weaknesses, and worse, all of the stuff that wasn't done because of, during that sort of window of time when stuff should have, could have, would have been done, those things are really, really surging to the forefront now, because it's one thing for somebody to say, we need ventilators, we need this, we need that. But then it's quite another when the hospitals start literally talking about how many people they died that day in their little hospital or their little area within the hospital. So it's going to be, this sounds crazy to say, but it's going to become more real in the coming days in some ways than it has been up till now. And again, for people who are awake and paying attention, they know how bad it is. But again, you have 49% of Republicans who just don't think this is a problem at all. And you only have 51% of Republicans who think it might be a problem. It's going to start getting real for them. There's talk about a real hotspot opening up in New Orleans because of all the people that were there during the Mardi Gras. There's all kind, Florida. It looks like it's also going to be another really, really big and significant hotspot. And of course, the governor there just doesn't feel that there's any need to put any restrictions on anybody, for goodness sakes. So that's what they're dealing with. But as I said, it really does appear that more and more people are going to start really recognizing or seeing objectively what's going on. Now, this is the other thing that I just want to mention here. So there's been some polls, and it boils down to, Trump's approval rating is going up. And how can that be? I mean, he's proved beyond a shadow of a doubt his complete ignorance and incompetence. How is it that that approval rating of his is climbing? Okay, here's sort of the short answer. In the immediate, when there is a crisis and a government starts handing out money, that literally in and of itself is enough to create an uptake in approval, because it feels as to the individual person, who, of course, who are answering these do you approve or not approve questions, right? That to the average person sort of signals the fact that the government is responding. There's a problem. The government is in there governing and doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And so his approval rating is starting to bubble up. It's not going to take very long, unfortunately, that, yeah. So those very people who are approving and they got their $1,000 or whatever they got from the government and that pleased them in the moment, they're really, really not going to be very pleased when their cities, towns, and communities become hotspots, as it's going to happen, and they start to watch their family, their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers get viciously ill or worse, die. That $1,000 is not going to mean very much if people are dying, and by that time there probably will be some restrictions, and so you can't even have like a funeral. They can't even go say their goodbyes. That's the reality of what happens when states don't behave. They don't react as they should. They don't get in line with science and medicine. So the approval rating for right now is going to tick up. And you know what? Let it tick up. Who cares? It's not going to be ticking up in October and November. Okay, and that's what you need to stay focused on. If he is still in office, and I'm not so sure, but if he is, at that point, his approval rating is not going to hold whatever high he manages to drag it up to in this point in time, simply because this is a momentary thing and the money, okay? But the reality of this going on for 3 and 4 months, and then it slowing down a little bit in the summer, and then it coming back with a big roar in the fall and winter, that money isn't going to mean a whole lot. Okay, it really isn't. And for a lot of those places that are becoming hotspots now, they don't even have a few months. What they have is a few weeks, 3, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And frankly, from what I've heard, the money isn't even going to be arriving in people's pockets before it gets really, really bad. So when your community is on fire, and when everything is soggy and wet and dripping and in ruins, and somebody gives you $1,000, really? It doesn't mean much, and it's not going to. Yeah, this is the thing, right? Everything he does, and you're going to see this next week, and I want to say almost like towards middle week, the end of the week, he's going to really be, looking for that victory. He's going to be looking for praise because he made decisions, which of course he didn't make. But people are not going to be quite so quick to pat his head and say, good Donnie, you did wonderful, Donnie. There's going to be less and less of that, because the reality is more and more stuff is coming out, more information is coming out, and as it continues to come out, especially over the next, I want to say like 14 to 21 days, it's going to get exponentially. It's just going to increase exponentially to a point where it's almost hard to keep track. He's going to be really struggling to find his victory speech. Okay, it's going to be tough. So again, you can anticipate some backlash from him after he does this quick couple of day, look how amazing I am, I saved the stock market, I saved the economy. Well, you know, by this time next week, he's going to be screaming up and down because, again, that's what he does. And so, again, you're going to see more and more people abandoning ship, right? Just sort of quietly leaving him. They're not making a big fuss about it. Maybe even on the surface, they look sort of like they're agreeing with him. But more and more, you're going to see government officials starting to pull into a uniform line. Not all of them, but a good portion of them. There are going to be those few, and Trump is included, unfortunately, who are going to hang on to the false narrative as long as they can. They simply like or prefer living in that fantasy world. They simply don't want to take responsibility for having to look up this stuff for themselves, figure out what the facts are, and make decisions based on cold hard facts in reality. They want to just release all their problems and troubles, hand them over to Trump or their government officials on a silver platter and say, you deal with that. And if it's unpleasant, I don't want to hear about it. And if it makes my incredible president look bad, I really don't want to hear about it. So you're going to see that there are still going to be pockets that are still really, really resistant to sort of understanding that this is super serious. And that, I'm sorry, is going to be not only cause the unnecessary death of people, but it is going to stab many, many of those government types right in the back and bring them down. Because, you know, and so it should, frankly. And so it should. So again, you know, you're going to see this ratcheting up of anxiety, of worry. The people of the United States are going to start getting more and more anxiety-ridden and worried as the numbers start creeping up. Well, they don't creep either. They're speeding up. They're flying up. There's going to be increased anxiety and worry and stress. And it doesn't matter how hard or not hard they think that their government is trying to write this and get control over it. Your federal government is not, and they have failed miserably. And they don't even seem to be offering support the way they should be offering support to help companies retool so they can actually start making the stuff that's needed. And that confuses me. Like, I know here in Canada, our government is actually helping certain businesses retool so they can start making the products that are necessary. And this is kind of cool too. I heard the other day that distilleries here in Canada who have access to all of that really strong alcohol, they have stopped their assembly lines to make the alcohol, like, you know, your liquor, and they have started making hand sanitizer because they have the abundance of that really powerful alcohol component that goes in to making a hand sanitizer actually sanitize. So it's curious that the government, the federal government out there just doesn't seem to want to. They want, and again, this is absolutely indicative of Trump and his mindset and his behavior. He wants them to do him a favor. He wants them to come to him and say, oh, please, Donald, let us incur all kinds of expense to make you look better. We will produce what you need, and we're going to make you look better, and isn't that marvelous? As opposed to We are a country. We need to pull together. And you know what? What does the government need to do? What do you need, company ABC, so that you can start producing this widget or that widget? Okay. So anxiety is going to ratchet up. People are going to start to understand that their federal government is not doing what they should be doing. And unfortunately, in a lot of red states, even they are going to start recognizing that, wait a minute, we seem to be reading two different books here or hearing two different stories. And you know, there's going to be suffering from this. It's going to be broad. It's going to be people getting sick. It's going to be government officials finding themselves in an unenviable position. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it really looks as if the next 14 days are actually going to be emotional. They're going to be stressful. There's going to be a lot of harsh truths coming out, and there's going to be some really strong reactions to finding out what those harsh truths are. And there's actually going to be disappointment, a sense of betrayal, a sense of, you didn't have our back, Mr. Governor, Mr. President, Mr. Senator. And that is going to have a very, very long impact on a lot of people. And Nancy's just going to keep on ticking. She's going to be keeping that boat as steady and straightforward as she can, because she understands it. She gets it. And she even knows how to get the two sides to come together when it's important enough. And in some ways, at least we should be grateful that some of the people she has to deal with and negotiate on the Republican side, they're worms, and they've done nothing good for the country, but they're at least political animals enough so that they have some understanding of sort of what they need to do and how they need to do it. A lot of them are operating under this kind of illusion that some way or another, this is just sort of going to blow over. They're going to get under control. And by the fall time, when people really do get serious about the election, they're going to be able to sort of paint flowers over the mud hole. Sorry, I had to think of another word that didn't start with an S and end with a T, and I just kind of went blank there, talking about growing flowers over compost. There we go. Yeah. Okay. So, listen, it's going to be a hard week. Okay, it's going to be a hard weekend. The numbers are going to keep escalating, and more people are going to start understanding that the government really isn't saying anything helpful. They're not doing anything helpful. Trump is making a fool of himself because he's living some fantasy illusion. He lives in this very, I often describe it as a kaleidoscope bubble that he lives in, because that's really what it feels like when you go into the space. It's like reality is so obscured outside of this bubble that he lives in. So he's going to stay in that bubble. And hopefully, let us all take a moment and pray that the news organizations start interrupting these hour-and-a-half long press conferences every afternoon where he spews out 80, 90, 100% garbage, and and then everybody has to fix it, right? Stop putting it on the airwaves. You can cut back and forth. When somebody intelligent is speaking, go back to it. But stop the nonsense of people's ears being inundated for an hour and a half, 45 minutes, because he wants to chat. He wants to stand in front of the microphone. He wants to tell you your story and his story and how he came to the conclusion of your story via his story. Shut him up. Okay, so again, you know what? We need to stay safe. We need to distance ourselves. We need to do the things that we need to do to stay healthy and strong. Incorporate into that some downtime. Find something on television to laugh about. Pull out some music that you really enjoy and dance around the living room with it. For those of you who live in warmer locales, um, I'm jealous, frankly, at this moment. But you know, step outside a little bit. You don't have to wander the neighborhoods. Just get outside and take 15 deep breaths of air, which probably is a lot less polluted than it was, like, you know, even several weeks ago. Um, you know, decompress, bring yourself down. And most importantly, do not let every bit of news that might seem a little bit positive for the other side to throw you off your game. Don't, it doesn't, in some ways, it doesn't matter now. It doesn't matter if his approval rating goes up by 5 points right now. It's not going to stay there. So, you know, let it go. Let it go. All right. Thank you ever so much for the support that you have given Soulprint. I really appreciate it. It is lovely to see such intelligent, smart, clever comments. I enjoy them all. I love the thumbs up. I welcome all of my new subscribers. It's lovely, and I'm so happy to welcome you to Soulprint. Okay, until next time, stay safe, be well, wash your hands. Bye.